Have you ever thought about what a healthy ecosystem sounds like? Perhaps a visual image comes to mind of what a natural environment may look like when it's healthy. But what does it sound like for an ecosystem to be able to support life in various forms? Many humans enjoy the sounds of nature. For example, songbirds in an early morning, or the sound of the breeze rustling leaves in a tree, or the rhythmic pulsing of cicadas on a summer evening. But what about human sounds? How do our sounds fit into the soundscape? And how do birds, for instance, respond to the sounds that we make? How are birds impacted by the sounds that we make, especially industrial and urban sounds? My name is Anna Showalter, and I am a pianist and music educator. As a musician, I'm interested in using music to help people listen to sound more broadly and to connect with living beings who share our sound worlds. I'm pleased to introduce a new piece of music written for piano and electroacoustics titled Gray Catbird. This piece of music focuses on a specific bird species, the gray catbird, and tells the story of how this bird is impacted by living in areas with high amounts of human noise. This piece is written by composer Ashkan Tabatabaie with visual art by Audrey Lund. The piece is based on and the concept is developed by research, scientific research coming from Dr. Dana Moseley and her graduate students at James Madison University.
My name is Dana Moseley. I'm a professor in the biology department at James Madison University. I study birds. One of the main things I'm looking at is their vocal communication, their bird song. Birds use song to find a mate, to set up and defend their territories. They're also using songs and calls to learn social information, if a place is a good place to stop over on their migration, if there's a predator in the area or a good food source. So if we're thinking about bird conservation and bird survival and reproduction, then we do need to think about their behaviors that control their ability to do those things. When we think about urbanization, urban noise pollution is a major pollutant. So like some people study lead or mercury, noise pollution is maybe a type of pollution we don't think about so much. Since about 2000, we've known that in noisier areas, some bird species sing differently. So populations in noisy areas might sing a higher pitch than those members of the same species in a more rural or quieter area. I use this background research to really inform what I do at James Madison. So with undergrads and graduate students, I'm studying an urban gradient of birds. Specifically, I'm looking at the gray catbird. So the gray catbird is one of these birds that really spans a lot of habitats. I can find it in the national forest around here near Harrisonburg. I can find it in city parks, farms, but also right in the middle of urban centers, right in the middle of Harrisonburg, even in the center of Washington, D.C. along the National Mall. These birds, individuals are experiencing really different habitats. And so some of their habitats might be very noisy, and other habitats might not be, might be more quiet and contain a lot of different species of birds. Catbirds have this cool behavior. They mimic other species. So it's maybe not the entire part of their song like a mockingbird does, that's their cousin, but rather catbirds are using some mimicry in their song. When we think of how catbirds are performing their mimicry, they probably are experiencing different bird communities. One thing I'm looking at is how noise pollution and other aspects of urbanization, like built-up land, impervious surface, and the lack of trees, the lack of canopy cover, how might this change the community of birds that catbirds experience, whether they're in a forest, a suburb, a park, or the middle of a city? Since catbirds are mimicking, they might experience different sounds that they would then put in their repertoire of mimicry. My students and I were looking at just that. So one thing that we do to assess a habitat is we measure the actual level of noise. We use some fancy technology to do that, that accurately measures the pitches of urban noise. Generally, noise pollution is low pitched, but it can be very loud. And so the problem is that there's an overlap between the lowest pitches of noise and the bird's song. If birds are raising the pitch of their song, then they're able to escape some of that masking, some of that overlap. For the catbirds, there's really two things going on. Their goal is to transmit their song, to be heard by a territory rival or to be heard by a potential mate. So the goal is to transmit that song to be heard in order to successfully communicate. If they can't do that, then that's going to mean a lot more energy probably for them to spend either physically fighting with another catbird to defend its territory or going out to seek a mate. The other thing that's going on is that their song, the quality of their song, might be influenced by what goes into the mimicry part. What we found by recording the level of noise, recording the actual catbirds, and then recording the bird species in the community, we found that those community members really differ. So in rural areas, we find these birds that like forest interiors, like scarlet tanagers and warblers. In more urban areas, we find more house sparrows, starlings, grackles, things like that. And then there's some birds that really span the urban gradient, much like catbirds do. So robins, cardinals, Carolina wrens, things like that. For the catbirds, when we think of their whole mimicry repertoire, the part of their mimicry that represents the community is what we're really looking at. We found that not only does the bird community differ along an urban gradient, but also the catbird's mimicry differs along this gradient as well. The fact that the catbird's mimicry differs along this urban gradient is a really cool aspect of how urbanization, urban noise pollution can impact a community, and then that impacts the mating signal of a species, the gray catbird.
What would it look like for musicians to interact with this research about gray catbird and urban noise through music, the art of sound? Composer Ashkan Tabatabaie and I collaborated on this question. Ashkan has a background in science research, and so he was the perfect collaborator for this project. The two of us learned a lot about Dr. Moseley's research. We visited her in the lab, we talked with her and her graduate students many times in order to understand what they were interested in learning about catbird song through their research. And through that process, we pulled out several threads that we felt we could narrate through a musical performance.
Hello, I'm Ashkan Tabatabaie. I'm a visiting assistant professor of music and digital media at New College of Florida. After our first meeting with Dana, she explained a lot of different aspects of bird songs that she analyzed in her research, and immediately I was able to sort of pick up some of the elements that are similar. You can find them in also music and song analysis, like human song analysis as well, such as frequency and rhythm, or the spectrum of the songs and the sounds. Through those conversations and investigating some of the research materials, I was able to pick up some of those aspects and translate them into music composition. For transcribing the bird songs, I actually use various software programs. The first software program that I used was called Raven Pro, and I opened all the recordings that we had, or some of the recordings that we had. And the cool thing about that software is that you can sit down and label all different portions of the songs, and find different mimics that the catbird has, and then label those specific mimics in the songs as well. That information was already in the software program. So what I did, I picked some of those mimics that I was interested in incorporating into the final composition, and then later on I imported them in another software program. It's called Sonic Visualizer. And what that software program does, it takes the recording that you enter in the software, and it translates it into a lot of different types of information about the recording. Like, for example, it would give you some information about the frequency component that exists in that recording or that specific mimic. Or it would give you some information about the length and then some rhythmic aspects of the. And another feature that software had, in addition to the visual aspect of it, was the fact that you could actually slow down the recording. And through that, I was able to sit down and look at the visual translation of the recordings with all the information in it, but at the same time at a slower speed. And through that, I was able to figure out a lot of detail that you wouldn't be able to see or hear in that case if it was not slowed down. And I took all that information and converted them to musical notes in Sibelius. And then after that, I would just go back and forth between the actual recording and the transcription in the software program, which was done with the piano sound. And then I would just do this over and over in order to get something at the end that is very similar to the actual recording. The way I designed the piece was based on the locations that the research was done in. So I decided to go only with 3 of those locations that were studied based on their urbanization factor. One very rural area, which was the National Forest, and then another one which was sort of a suburban area or environment, which is the Arboretum at JMU, and finally the very urban site that was DC National Mall. So yeah, these 3 locations actually shaped up the whole structure or the overall structure of the piece. So in the rural area, you could tell that the overall pitch range of the mimics that you hear from the piano is lower. And as you go to the second section, where we have the Catbird in the suburban area, the whole overall frequency range of piano actually goes higher. And in urban area, that continues to be true. And that's exactly what Dana's research also showed, that when catbirds in urban environments tend to sing higher in order to be able to get out of the masking effect that is happening as a result of the noise pollution with their lower range of their songs.
Next, you will hear several of Ashkan's birdsong transcriptions for the piano. Since the catbird is a mimic, you will be hearing the piano mimicking the catbird, who is mimicking the original bird. So you'll hear 3 renditions of each song, and you'll be able to compare the 3 orally and visually using the spectrogram and the musical score.
My name is Audrey Lund, and I am the content strategist of Digital Content Helix, LLC, and I'm also a violinist as well. When I was creating the visuals for the Gray Catbird piece, I was trying to imagine how the world would look through the eyes of the catbird, even though we don't know for sure what that might look like. One aspect of that for me was that I think that the catbirds, they don't exactly see and think of objects in the same way we do. They just see a continuous 3D environment of a sea of leaves, for example, or maybe what's called impervious surfaces, which would be concrete or brick wall and things like that. I started the creative process by putting together images of the environment for the catbird. So to do that, I used Photoshop, and I created different layers to give a sense of depth for the audience to see while they're listening to the piece. And then what I could do with those images is animate them using Premiere Pro and After Effects. Some of the animations that I added were the rustling of the leaves and also a motion blur that was supposed to represent the catbird looking around its environment rapidly, just like we see birds do when we go outside. The audience sees through the eyes of the catbird, and so you can see the sun in the sky moving as the catbird is traveling to different areas, whether it be the rural, suburban, or urban environments. By adding the visuals to the Gray Catbird piece, my goal was to help the audience be able to listen to the piece more effectively.
When I was listening to the piece and looking at the visuals, the first time I put myself in the position of a researcher, an observer, recording a catbird, looking at the catbird, trying to find it through the leaves. And the first opening visuals of green habitat and blue sky really made me imagine recording those catbirds in the most rural communities. You could hear their songs really loudly, transmit nicely, low down on the piano. Basically, their songs were carrying very well through their environment. There was a lot of different other bird species in the community coming through in those rural habitats. Next, when the bird flew into a more suburban habitat, you could hear a little bit of urban noise start. Maybe the bird community shifted a little bit, and you could see a little bit of changes to those visuals. When I watched and listened to the piece the second time, I really noticed how Audrey changed the visuals, and I put myself more in the position of the catbird, thinking about the bird in its own habitat. So there's a term that we use in behavior called Umwelt, which means the world unto an organism. And I was thinking about the catbird in the suburb, hearing bird species, but also hearing a little bit of noise. When the catbird next flew to the city, I could hear the urban noise so loud. The bird species really changed. There was so much urban noise, and it was this cacophonous sound. The visuals really put you in the place of what it might be like to be a catbird in the urban centers. So there was concrete, there was fences, and on the sound, the catbird seemed to be really struggling to give its song, to be heard, competing with the urban noise, competing with the urban birds. Aiming to sing higher, and that's a real struggle on the piano to be as loud on that upper register. That really came through to me, that the whole picture of the place was just this cacophonous, busy sound and busier visuals too that Audrey did.
One way that this piece of music, Gray Catbird, is different from much of the music in the standard classical piano repertoire is that the performer has more discretion into how the piece is put together. So the composer, Ashkan, has created a structure for the piece. There are the 3 sections with the 3 different soundscapes, and he has provided the birdsong transcriptions that go with each of the sections. But the performer has the discretion to decide what order to play each of the bird songs, how many times to repeat them, and how fast to go. So each of the performances may be a little bit different. In order to play these transcriptions, it's really important to spend a lot of time listening to birds, either outside or recordings of catbirds. The musical score, the transcriptions written in musical notation, are only an approximation of what it sounds like for a catbird to sing. And so if you were to base your performance only on the musical score, it would probably sound nothing like the actual song of the bird. So it's important to have that sound in your mind coming from actual listening to birds of what you want this how to bring the transcription to life. And that's one of the things that I've really appreciated about working with this piece, is the way that it's forced me to take ownership in developing the performance, developing the sound concept, and learning to listen to birds more deeply and in a new way. Insight that has come from playing this piece has been my emotional response to each of the 3 soundscape sections. In the last section, the most urban section, which is based in Washington, D.C., the urban sound is so overwhelming and so present that it's kind of stressful to listen to. And not just to listen to, but when you're trying to play, when you have these transcriptions that you're trying to perform and you want to communicate something, this bird has something to say, and as the pianist, I'm trying to speak for the bird, but it's hard for the instrument to project over this urban noise. And so it feels like a struggle, and it's a bit frustrating, to be honest. In addition, in that most urban setting, there are fewer transcriptions to choose from, because in Dr. Moseley's research, in the urban settings, there are fewer bird species that are singing in those areas. So as the performer, I have fewer musical material to work with, and so I'm repeating myself multiple times on each song, and it becomes a little repetitive and a little bit boring. Now, I don't know how the catbird feels about singing in an urban environment. Does the catbird feel stressed? Does it feel frustrated? Does it feel like it's struggling? We don't know, and these are human emotions that we can't put on another animal. But I do believe that the experience of performing the piece, and I hope also listening to the piece, provides us with the opportunity to put ourselves in the bird's place and to empathize with this bird. Working with this piece of music, in learning it, in developing the concept for it and performing it, has heightened my awareness to birdsong in my everyday life. It has heightened my awareness to some of the challenges that birds face in urban environments. And it has heightened my awareness to the urban noise that I contribute to with my car and as a human living in an urban center. Working with this piece of music has helped me to feel a greater sense of solidarity with the gray catbird and other birds as well. And I hope that people that listen to this piece of music will feel the same.